we'd like to thank the following sponsors.
Good afternoon, industry friends, and welcome to the Glass Build Connect Installation Thursdays workshop session on quality management systems. I'm Jeff Dalaba, and with me today is Ben Beeler. We're delivering this program on behalf of the North American Contractor Certification Program. It's likely that we would all agree that quality plays a big role in everything within our industry. It can also be said that it is vital to the success of contractor entities and that install systems and products. Today, we look forward to exploring with you some of our core components of quality management systems as we see them. We see that these can not only provide positive outcomes for projects, but also how they can manage projects in better ways for you and your organization. This allows for more consistent successes and, of course, identifies when something doesn't quite go right. It also provides a clear path for how to deal with those situations. Contractors that have adopted these systems, and when we talk about this with them today, they say that they're happy to share these systems because it makes their business better and provides a clear competitive edge. As you look around the glazing installation field today, it quickly becomes apparent that there are some really great contractors out there that are overcoming many challenges in order to produce great installed projects. But with that said, there is pressure that comes with an industry that's growing quickly and finding new ways to deploy building envelope systems. One thing that we consistently hear is that there are labor shortages and fewer qualified glazers to run jobs. Along with this, the COVID combined with a robust construction cycle has created backlogs and interruptions in the supply chain. Let's also not leave out that the design community continues to push the envelope with more intricate designs using more and more complex systems. The end result of all this is that some construction defects are likely to occur, and staff training along with a thorough approach to quality management systems can help to minimize defects in any environment. While there are many reasons for a glazing project to have issues, there are some that are in direct control of the installer and the glazing contractor team. Product defects or failures from manufacturing are somewhat less likely, but can sometimes be headed off through thorough inspections and verifications of the material before they're installed. Where we're going to focus today, though, is on the discussion of oversight, verification, along with poor installation habits. Everyone seems to love pictures of projects where somebody else screwed up. We'll share a few of those today and talk about how they may have been avoided. But first, let's take a look at what we mean by quality management systems and what some different interpretations of ways to install controls continue to provide better outcomes. You're going to hear us talk about quality systems not just as an end check to see if errors are visible. You likely use many systems already in your shops and field operations for quality, with some that are written and some that are ingrained with years of experience and hard knocks. A quality management system, by definition, is a collection of business processes that are used to meet customer expectations and enhance their satisfaction, of course. It also ties directly to laying out the strategic direction of your company. In short, it's a one-stop system that controls the production and output of your company in a way that you decide that will help bring the most value to your customers. So now let's take a look at what we mean by the word quality. We're simply referring to meeting customer expectations, customer specifications, contract requirements, and delivering a system that performs with fewer problems. This results in building a culture of professionalism within your organization and of course, pride that carries through from beginning to end of every project you work on. Let's also take a look at quality management systems and how they're built. As we mentioned a minute ago, quality management systems is a collection of business processes. The immediate item that jumps out to many when we say quality management systems is a quality manual. But the quality manual is simply the high-level layout of the entire quality program. The program itself includes procedures, methods, and checks to provide verification that the processes are carried out correctly. Also, methods to capture deficiencies and prevent them from happening through corrective and preventative actions, along with managing customer feedback as it comes back. A good system will also include management input. This is achieved through annual internal reviews by management and audits. Also, along with that, updating control and documents and procedures. The whole thing works together to provide a controlled approach to controlling quality on every project. I have to say that one of our NACC contractors said this best. He said, in the past, we focused on quality controls at the end of the process to make sure that client specifications are met. We spent significant resources fixing problems that could have been avoided. Now we put more emphasis on quality assurance throughout the process to prevent problems from occurring in the first place. And that was from Pacific Glazing Contractors in California. I think what this really captures is that you're going to find some defects by looking at an end product, but there can be things that happen along the way that could be avoided. And that's really one of the things that we're focusing on today through this quality management systems discussion is each step of the way, there's opportunities to improve the overall outcome of the project. I also think it's important that we differentiate QMS or quality management systems from quality control. What is the difference? We hear both. What does it mean when we say QMS versus quality control? They do go hand in hand, and they differ on their approach and also on their outcome. Quality management systems simply is a managerial tool. It's a very proactive approach to preventing defects. It involves your entire team, and it involves planning and a systematic documenting of processes. But when combined into one system, it prevents defects with a focus on process and controls. Now, on the other hand, if we look at quality control, well, it may mean some different things to different organizations. In general terms, it's a corrective tool. It's a way of being reactive. There's an inspector or maybe a supervisor that looks at the end product and then identifies any defects or errors and marks them for correction. So they do go hand in hand, but I think it's important to note that quality management systems is a more proactive approach that involves a system in order to prevent the defects in the first place. The important thing about quality management systems is that it helps the management team remove doubt and provide accountability when they're not at the job site watching, the installation of every fastener or everything going into the system. Proper procedures and controls help to do that for them. And of course, QMS is all about improvement. So when an error or defect occurs, it has a defined path on how to improve and not repeat them in the future. Now that you've had a look at what we mean by quality management systems and the word quality, let's take a look at what the final anatomy of a system like this might look like. And I don't want to concern anybody by making this look too complicated, but remember there are many pieces already in place in most organizations. Quality management systems is a way of helping to capture all of those into one place. But today we're going to focus in on three areas that I've highlighted here, which is operational procedures, and you see some of the steps there, which we'll cover in a little more detail, along with verification procedures and some of the steps which Ben will cover, and then CAPA, corrective actions and preventative actions, which is determining the root cause of quality issues and finding ways to improve and prevent those again in the future. We typically deliver these to our clients in 3 different workshops from a group of workshops that we offer. That's operating procedures, verification, and CAPA. We're going to look today at some high-level samples from each of these areas. And then as promised, we're also going to look at some pictures where somebody else made some errors, and it's always fun to see what somebody else is doing. Let's start though at the core of this, which is creating operational procedures. We very much believe that operational procedures should be simple, and they should also do what makes sense for your business. This isn't a time to create something that's cumbersome and hard to follow, or many pages, or in fact reams of paper in some situations. This is simple, clear, and concise. Why is it that we have procedures in the first place? Well, it's a way to create a track to run on. But we're going to talk about that, and along with how to create procedures, give you some examples of what a procedure looks like, both in an assembly situation along with verification. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about document controls, because when you have procedures, it's important also to control those procedures. I guess to start, what do operational procedures do? In a nutshell, they're going to communicate importance. They're going to communicate to your team that you have a set way that things are done. It provides consistency, eliminates deniability, and when you have a track to run on, especially in a situation where we're seeing these labor shortages and some vacuum as those that are skilled leave the industry or retire, we're able to increase competency of new workers and existing workers by having procedures and this way of doing things that's already documented. At the end of the day, the goal is to reduce risks and minimize errors, which overall does improve quality for your organization. It may seem daunting at first to say, well, how do I write a procedure, and how am I going to do all of this and make it short and concise and do the things we're talking about? Well, it all starts with having a track to run on for the procedure. So we have to say what it is that the procedure is for, why is there a procedure in place for that operation, who, so we're going to assign responsibility, and along with that, say how. That's the steps. That's how it's done. Again, clear and concise. One sheet of paper is absolutely better than multiple sheets of paper when possible. So keeping it short, keeping it simple, and as we started in this section by saying, do what makes sense for your business. This is an example of a procedure. So this kind of creates a template, if you will, of what a procedure might look like in your organization. You may have some other way of documenting this, and that's certainly okay. But in this case, the document is named, it's numbered in order to help with controlling the document, and dated. There's also a created and approved by, so that one person creates it and another person reviews it. Always good in quality to have a second set of eyes looking at things. The objective, or that's the why, is stated. And then the responsibility, who is going to carry this out. So in this example, we're looking at an assembly procedure. And this covers things like the proper use of manufacturer's installation instructions for the assembly and drawings, and it assigns responsibility of who's doing what tasks. Along with that, it also designates how materials are to be handled, and what some of the checks at the end are is all joints are tight and frame to be assembled is squared, gaskets are in the right place, and using sealant that's not expired. So it covers several key points. And this, of course, is just a simple example. Each organization would certainly have different takes on what should be in an assembly procedure. But again, I think you'll see from this one-page example, it's short, it's simple. In this case, we use bulleted points to cover this so that it's easy to follow. It's also targeted, just the key items that will make a difference are highlighted on this. I think one of the things that we hear is we go around the industry and work with different contractors and manufacturers, is we hear, my people know what they're supposed to be doing. They've been trained, they've worked here for 10 or 20 years. And so when you ask the question, how do you know that a frame is being assembled correctly? The answer sometimes comes back that, well, they've been doing this for years, so they know what they're doing. I have to say that experience is not always an assurance of following the proper procedure or doing things the right way, especially in situations where a new system is being used or a variation of an existing system. Having a procedure and a track to run on will always overcome personnel errors. And as a segue from that, as we talk about the fact that errors do come up, corrective actions and preventative actions are a way to improve your quality and performance. Corrective actions and preventative actions are doing exactly what they say, correcting items that do come up as deficiencies or defects or failures, but also preventing things from happening in the future that could impair quality. I'm going to turn it over to Ben Beeler now to talk about this section, and thank you.
I'm going to talk a little bit about corrective action and preventative action, what we call CAPA in the industry. And this is really the cornerstone, it's the foundation of a quality improvement process. Without this, you really can't improve quality. So I'm going to ask the tough question now. Is quality important to your business? Well, of course it is. Everybody says it is. Everybody believes it is. But how do you measure quality? If you're not measuring quality, then how can you control it? How can you improve it? There are a few things that businesses look at in determining whether or not they're going in the right direction, and they have indices, they've got graphs, they've got numbers that they look at on their dashboard on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. But seldom is there a number for quality. So if that's the case, how can you hope to improve it? Well, there's some simple steps to that. But first I want to ask you, do you know how much you spent on reworks last year? Do you know the cost of rejected materials? Not supplier materials that you rejected, but the cost of the materials that you rejected based on errors that your people made. Do you have that number and in the forefront of all the numbers that you look at? Do you know the labor and material cost for correcting punch list items? Sure, all of those numbers are squirreled away somewhere in job folders, but if they're not forward and on your dashboard and in the forefront of your meetings and your day-to-day business, then you're probably just paying lip service to quality improvement. So what issues are costing you the most? Do you know if your quality is improving or declining? The first steps to determining that are to document your quality issues, to record them somewhere, not in the job folder, but to record them in a quality document somewhere where you put this information. You need to record things like punch list items, delays, warranty issues, callbacks, supplier issues, and all the information that went along with that. You need to also look inward and not look at just the things that the customer brings to your attention, but look at your shortages. Shortages when you ship something out from your shop to your job site, reworks that were caused by your people, rejects caused by your people again, incorrect installations. And if you have a process for going behind your workers to see that they're doing the right things and you find that they're not, those types of things need to go into this document as well. So what do you do with this information? First thing you do, and probably the most important, is you quantify it. If you can't put a number on quality, then you can't monitor it, measure it, or improve it. So put a dollar value to it, the dollar value that it costs to correct it. Next, you examine the root cause of the issue. And this is probably the hardest thing to do, not from the standpoint that it takes a lot of effort, but it's the hardest because you need to understand exactly what root cause of the issue is. Not the how it happened, but dig down through the layers of the onion to get to the core of it, the why it happened. Once you do that, then you figure out what could have gone right with that situation. What procedures, what processes or policies could you put into place that when followed would have caused that not to happen, caused the issue, the error, the reject not to have occurred. Once you do that, then you implement the change. Sounds simple, but you need to communicate the new procedure, the new policy to everyone who it applies to. This way, everybody knows what's expected of them. These are the procedures that Jeff talked about. This is the roadmap. And then don't stop there. Monitor the effectiveness. Look going forward to see if this type of problem happens again. Now, if you really want to pinpoint your focus and make a big improvement on your company going forward, you need to take all of your errors and all of your documented issues, quality issues, and categorize them. Either categorize them by their type or categorize them by their root cause. Put them into specific baskets, a dozen, half a dozen, whatever you come up with, whatever makes sense. The fewer the better. But you categorize them so you've got groups of problems that are caused by the same type of issue. Examine a specific time period. Go back 3 months and look at those categories and see what's in those categories. What dollar value, which basket is the most valuable basket. If you don't have that data going backwards, then start now, go forward 2-3 months, and then examine the dollar value of those baskets. Rank them by value, and then attack them in order of the most valuable to the least valuable. That way you'll make the biggest impact on the quality of your company. And then as you go forward from that point, continue to monitor those baskets to see if more items are going into them, into those categories, or if you're actually making an impact. If they continue to go up, then you might need to re-examine what the root cause was or re-examine what your implemented procedure might have been. So how does something like this happen? In this particular storefront application, the drawings clearly show a weep system in the front of the storefront framing, but the installers very, very expertly sealed right over it. So this can happen for 3 different reasons. The first is that the installers don't understand the systems and how they work, and that's training. It's not enough simply to train somebody by telling them what it is they're supposed to be doing, but you also need to tell them why they're doing it. If they know why they're doing it, they're much more apt to follow the procedures, to understand them and do it the way it's supposed to be done. So that's training. That's number 1. Number 2 is that there's a lack of procedures that require the review and adherence to manufacturer's fabrication and installation instructions. Don't know how many job sites that I've been to or shops where I'm looking to see what the installers or what the fabricators are using to go by, and there are no instructions anywhere around. They're going by rote, by what they did last week, last month, last year. But systems change. If you poll the systems manufacturers, storefront, curtain wall, even suppliers of things like silicone or other sealants and other products, you'll find that over 95% of the times they're called out to a job site to look at something because it hasn't performed the way it's supposed to be was caused by the product not being used per the manufacturer's instructions. So that's procedures. And then thirdly, absence of a supervisory tool to assure compliance. This is management. It's management's responsibility to make sure things are being done right. But so often it's not pinpointed. There's no set procedure that they use for checking to see that things are done right. So let's look at root cause. Let's look at some issues and let's look at the root cause. But it's not so much the how did it happen, which is typically all we look at in the field, but what happened? Why did it happen? Where did it happen? When? There's a lot of things that go into figuring out exactly what caused a quality issue. In this particular situation, you've got a pressure bar on a curtain wall. The anchors, the fasteners rather, to the pressure bar are not fully tightened. You can see daylight between the back of the screw and the face of the pressure bar. So typically the question is asked, how did this happen? But that's not really important. The important thing is, why did it happen? The typical scenario is when the question's asked, what happened? The answer would be the pressure bars weren't snug against the glass. Naturally, the next question is, how did that happen? And the answer would be the installers didn't tighten them enough. Well, it's kind of obvious, but that's typically where people stop. They chastise the employees, they correct the issue, and then they go about business without any concern for what's down the road. So if you look at this, you go through the root cause analysis of why this happened, you find, and this is just one scenario, one situation that we have seen in the field. We'll look at several here, but in this one, the first installer was told another worker would come behind him and tighten the fasteners to the proper torque. So why wasn't that done? Because another worker came along and put the cover plates on before the tightening was done. Why did that happen? Well, that installer didn't know that the fasteners hadn't been tightened properly. Why didn't he? Well, he was just told to start putting covers on. So he didn't ask any questions, he did it. So why did that happen? Well, it was because of a lack of procedure. There were no expectations that people understood what they were supposed to be doing specifically in their jobs. So if there were a quality control procedure for curtain wall installation that had these 3 bullet pointed items, chances are this would not have happened. The people would have done what they're supposed to have done, pointed out that they hadn't finished before the final covers were put on. Pressure bar fasteners are to be tightened as specified. Before installing cover plates, confirm with foreman that pressure bar fasteners have been checked. Foreman is to check tightness of pressure bar fasteners prior to installing cover plates. This type of procedure would more than likely keep that problem from happening. A second possible scenario, and again, one that we've seen in the field, is that installers thought they were tight enough. Why did that happen? Because they weren't familiar with the system. Why weren't they familiar with the system? Well, their supervisor hadn't reviewed the manufacturer's installation instructions with them, so they didn't know exactly what they were supposed to be doing. Why not? Because the supervisor thought that these guys knew what they were supposed to be doing. So how was this not caught? There was a lack of a verification process. The supervisor didn't come back to check to see that things were done the right way. He just assumed again. So if there were a written verification or a written checklist that said pressure bar properly tightened to specs that the supervisor had to fill out on a periodic basis, this type of situation would have been caught. A third possibility, and in this particular picture, this is actually what happened. Fasteners wouldn't go in any further. Why not? Fasteners were too long for the system. Well, why were we using fasteners that were too long for the system? Because the PM ordered those fasteners from a different source to save money. Well, so all eyes turned to the PM. Well, he didn't do anything wrong. So why were the screws too long? The supplier sent the wrong fasteners. And why wasn't this caught? Because there wasn't a procedure in the shop for verifying that received materials matched what was ordered. So the shop took in the materials, the fasteners, the wrong fasteners, sent them out to the job site, and this was the situation. So had there been an operational procedure for the shop for receiving materials that had a bullet pointed item that said material type, description, size, etc., are to be confirmed as meeting purchase order description, this situation likely could have been averted. But why did something like this happen? Pressure bars are put on upside down. The weep holes are below the center line, so they're not doing any good. The drawings and the manufacturer's installation instructions clearly indicate where the weep holes are supposed to be located, but yet they weren't. So you start digging down. Installer thought since water flowed down, weep slots should be low. I've actually heard that before, many times. So in theory, it sort of makes sense, but in practice, it's counter to the way the systems are designed. So why did this go unchecked? No one told the installers that it was wrong. Why not? Supervisors didn't catch it. Why not? He either wasn't checking or more frightening, he didn't know what to check for. So why not? Why didn't he check or know what to check for? Because again, there was a lack of a verification procedure. Looking at another example, here's a curtain wall that was placed right on the sill. No gap between the sill and the curtain wall, even though the drawings call for a 3/8 inch minimum. And there was no room for the system provided T-anchors, so they fashioned something similar that they thought would hold the system in place. So why did this happen? The opening didn't properly accommodate the frames. Why not? Wrong deductions were made for the finished size, for the finished opening size. So why did that happen? Because field conditions didn't match the construction drawings. Why didn't they? Because last minute changes were made to the opening by another subcontractor. So why wasn't this caught? Because the field supervisor didn't notice the change to the opening. This is how you dig down through the layers of reasons to get to the root cause of the issue. And only when you get to the root cause can you actually attack the problem for the future. So in each one of these situations, there's a lack of a well-defined operational procedure or a verification process. Either one of those would catch it. The verification process would catch it if the operational procedures didn't cover it effectively. So if you take the root cause analysis exercise we just went through and you turn it in on itself and you look at this reason and determine or ask the question, why does this happen? Why are there no well-defined operational procedures or verification processes? You typically find that management is relying too heavily on what they think their people know and not enough on defined processes. And this is not uncommon in this industry. So look at it a little bit further, dig down a little bit deeper. Why does this happen? Management's typically focused on putting out fires and not focusing enough on the business as a whole. Putting out fires is the nature of the beast. It happens in this industry. But with the right processes in place, things can take care of themselves to some extent. So why does this happen? Because there's a lack of understanding about the benefits and implementation of a quality management system. Management typically doesn't realize what a quality management system can really do to easing some of the pains that they feel job to job. So you look at these things. Upper left, curtain wall right up against the wall, no workable joint there. On the bottom left, the wrong fasteners were used to fasten the shear block to the vertical member, so they didn't hold, which allowed the horizontal mullion to push out. And then on the right, a hodgepodge of materials scabbed together to create a setting block. These things you look at and it's easy at one point or another to point a finger, but whose responsibility is it really? Is it worker responsibility or management responsibility? Well, obviously it's both, because they're both doing jobs that relate to these type of things. So the first thing that needs to be looked at is education. That's training. They need to be trained on what to do and how to do it and why they're doing it. That's probably the most important thing. If they know why they're doing it and the consequences of not doing it right, they're much more apt to do it correctly. And then management's responsible for setting expectations. They have to let workers know what it is they're supposed to be doing. And we're focusing on a lot of field issues here, but that's not where it stops. Management needs to set expectations for their estimating staff, their project management staff, administrative support staff, as well as shop and field. Expectations need to be set, and that's where procedures come into place that Jeff talked about. And then finally, there needs to be a verification process. Management has to set expectations for their supervisors on how they want them to check things that are done in the field to see that they're done right. So let's look for a minute at the verification process. Verification is simply a written confirmation that a task has been properly performed. And it's done typically through random sampling. You don't have to check everything. If you've got a problem, it'll show up through random sampling. So you do random sampling and you use a written checklist. And I stress the word written. A written checklist makes the supervisors accountable to certain things that you want checked. And because it's in writing and because you need to have it turned in to somebody, your quality manager or some management personnel, then you've got the proof that it's being done. And it's in writing because, as we all know, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. We've learned that lesson all the hard way. So these are the elements of a verification process. The benefits are many. First of all, it tells supervisors what to look for, not just go out there and make sure they're doing that right, but go out there and make sure that they've got the weep holes in the right location, that they've got the right lengths gaskets, that they've got sealants where they're supposed to be, and the weep system is open. It's telling them what's important to you. It also gives them a management tool. That's a tool for them to manage the people that work for them that they haven't had before. They've been told, go make sure they're doing the right thing. Well, they're pulled in a million different directions. This focuses their attention on what's important. It tells everybody in the organization what's important. Workers who know that somebody is going to randomly check their work to see that it's done right are more apt to elevate their performance to meet your expectations. The fact that you're checking also identifies trouble spots. If there's an issue, if there's a problem and you find it, then you know where you need to be focusing your attention. Most likely training in a lot of situations. It could be procurement, it could be drawings, it could be other areas. But the verification process that finds something wrong shows you where you need to, where your trouble spots are and where you need to pay attention. And finally, it gives you peace of mind. You can sleep at night knowing that things are being done right rather than just assuming or hoping that they're being done right. Now, a checklist has to be manageable, kind of like procedures. They got to be short and simple. It's got to be not so lengthy. You can't cover everything. You just want to spotlight the key items, the things that if they're not done right will make the biggest impact, the biggest problems. So spotlight the main things that you want to make sure that people are doing. A checklist should also indicate the desired characteristic. It's not enough just to say, check setting blocks for proper location. You want to say, check setting blocks to see that they're at quarter points. I just use that as an example, but you don't want to assume by the way you word the checklist that the supervisor knows the way it's supposed to be done. And he probably does, and he should, but you want to remove any doubt. You want to have the desired characteristic listed on the checklist. And you can check for things that require disassembly. For instance, that setting blocks are at quarter points. I just use that again as an example. To do that, your supervisor may need to remove the pressure bar, or to check to see that the pressure bar weep holes are above the center line. He may need to remove the cover plate. It's okay to have checklist items that do require that. The checklists create accountability to the supervisor, as I mentioned before, for what to inspect. Checklist should have a place to put the project name and some sort of location identifier for future reference so that you know which frames were checked. And it should describe nonconformities. Anytime there is a nonconformity, there should be an area on the checklist where you can describe exactly what the nonconformity is, the details, because it's that information that you will then use later when you look for corrective actions and preventative actions. It's that information that you'll put into your log of quality issues to determine if you're improving or not. So that's the checklist. So how often do we check? What do we check? Again, that makes it's dependent upon your business and what makes sense for your business. Do you sample one per floor, one per day, 1 in 5? It all depends on a lot of things. The things you want to consider is what the likelihood of a problem is. You want to look back and figure out the frequency and severity of past issues. That'll help you determine how much you want to check in a given job. You might want to consider the complexity of the project, the complexity of the system, or even the client that you're trying to impress. Look at the risk, look at the crew experience, and look at the direct or incidental repair costs should a problem occur down the road after turnover. All those things are characteristics you want to consider when you determine if you're going to check 1 in 5, 1 in 20, or 1 per floor. So what happens when you find a nonconformity? Well, you want to expand the inspection. If it passes, of course, you stop. If there's a failure, then go 3 more. I use that as an example. Check 3 more openings. If none of those fail, then you've probably got a one-off situation. If you find more failure, then of course you want to expand that further. So the checklist, the things that you want to check for, in the examples that we've been using in this particular situation, we get a lot of mileage out of this picture. The weep holes are below the center line. So your checklist item should say, are horizontal pressure bar weep holes above the center line of the pressure bar? Yes, no. If you had a checklist like this and the supervisor used that and opened up took the cover plate off and found this, then you would know that you've got a problem on this particular job. And again, it's not just asking or suggesting that they look to see if the pressure, or excuse me, if the weep holes are in the right location. This is actually setting the characteristic for the desired effect. It's saying above the center line of the pressure bar. This is a project. Again, it's a pressure bar system curtain wall. The cover plates have no weep holes on the bottom. So that may be something you want to check. And it should say something like, do horizontal cover plates have weep holes located on the bottom edge? Yes, no. This would be caught in that situation. And this is a not too uncommon situation where the gasket's pulled away from the corner, creating an opening for water to infiltrate the system. It's not easy to get a 49-inch gasket into a 48-inch daylight opening. But yet that's typically what the specifications call for, and that's what's necessary to overcome the contraction or the shrinkage of the gasket over time. In this situation, they didn't do that. So your checklist item would say something like, are gaskets sized correctly? Again, indicating the desired effect or the desired characteristic, saying 1/4 inch per foot greater than the daylight opening. Otherwise, you're assuming that the supervisor knows what it should be, but this way it's spelled out. Management is setting expectations by the way they word this particular checklist. Now, I'll turn it back over to Jeff at this point to talk about how quality management systems give your company a competitive edge.
All right, Ben, that was some great points, and thank you for sharing that. Let's recap a bit. We started the program talking about what quality is and how quality management systems operate and what they mean. We've also showed some examples and samples of components of the system. I hope that you'll agree that you can gain a competitive edge when your team is performing at their best, with a proven track to run on. Using a proceduralized and verified approach not only increases competency of your team, but helps build a culture that instills pride and confidence. And really for you, in the end, you're reducing your risk and dealing with fewer errors and headaches that can be quite costly. We've talked about following plans and documented procedures. This approach could have prevented this library vestibule from having the curtain wall components and storefront components installed in the wrong locations. The plans called for a curtain wall system for the exterior, but it was simply reversed. procedures and verifications could have caught and prevented this situation altogether. Living near the border, I always carry currencies from both countries in my wallet, so I'm not saying or calling out any location for this defect based on the bill. But procedures and manufacturer's installation instructions especially are a key part of quality in installations. This example could have been prevented in this high vibration area by simply installing, according to the guidelines, which required anti-walk or W blocks that had been specified but were omitted in the job. I think you all agree it costs a lot less to do things right the first time and have the processes and procedures in place to do that. Increasing staff competency and, more than anything, a culture of quality is valuable. Understanding that it's not okay to use some other part that happens to be around when the right thing isn't available. A culture which makes it not okay to skip steps or not adhere to requirements. This example shows a few different errors. The left and right sill flashings were substituted and are there different heights. The fasteners directly through the back leg of the sill flashing. And the sill flashing end dams, either they can't be seen or aren't visible, or possibly they were omitted altogether. All again could have been avoided, not created costly issues to rework and driving up costs for the contractor and for the job itself. We hope this workshop's provided some ideas and maybe shed some light on ways to improve your organization and ideas for things to possibly consider implementing. Today, we'd like to welcome you to further the conversation and maybe even an opportunity to walk through some additional examples and samples and ideas. We have several different workshops that we would be thrilled to work with you on. Our certified contractors through the NACC program have already taken these steps and putting them in place, and they're seeing results. We continually hear that, as after going through this ANSI accredited certification program, that their organizations communicate better. Their businesses are better. They're seeing fewer reworks. They're catching things that they wouldn't have caught in the past. And they're really, our best testament to the program itself. For more information, we'd love to talk to you by contacting either myself at jeff@amscert.com or contact Ben Beeler at bbeeler@amscert.com. And of course, you can reach either one of us by going on to our website at www.naccprogram.com and clicking on Contact Us. We look forward to talking to you more, and we look forward to growing and improving this great industry together. We now welcome you to stick around so that we can do some live questions and answers and possibly talk about what's important for you and your organization, or maybe expand a little bit on the ideas. For those of you who can't stick around, we welcome you to some further conversation, or maybe even taking the opportunity to walk through some of our other programs, or expanding on what we talked about today by sitting through one of our workshops. We'll now go to questions and answers.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. We've had a lot of questions that have come in, but I'm going to start by sharing the results of one of the earlier polls, just out of curiosity for Ben and Jeff to see the results. And do companies have formalized quality management systems? Seems like some of us do, and then there's a few that don't, and some that aren't even sure yet. So I thought that was kind of an interesting poll to look at those results. Jeff, Ben, you want to make any comments on those?
Just one thing that comes to mind when I look at the answers that said not sure. It would be horrible if a company had a quality management system and its employees didn't know they had it. It's not doing what it's intended to do if that is the case.
Absolutely. Let me share the results for the second poll because it's so closely related. So does your company have a means for systematically measuring and reporting quality? And there again, we have a divide between the yeses and the nos. So I thought, again, that was kind of an interesting result as well. All right, let's go to some of the questions. There's a question here, which is timely and topical, is, has COVID and its effects on the job sites had an impact on quality management? Clarifying, is it more difficult? Is it more difficult to institute some of these policies with distancing and other requirements?
I'll field that one. A week ago, I would not have been able to answer that question, but in the last couple of days, I've had some instances where people have told me that COVID regulations and the reporting that they have to do and all the measures that they have to take in the shop and in the field and the office has really played havoc with their efficiency. And if it weren't for some of the processes and procedures they had already put into place to monitor what they do and to set expectations and so forth, they would have had even a harder road to hoe in keeping things on the straight and even.
Very interesting. All right, so the next question is, what if a company already has a quality manual? And what are you talking about here that might be different from what they might already what they might have existing?
There's certainly a difference in having a quality manual that sits on a shelf and a fully implemented system. So, you know, it's not something that every company has been able to take the time in order to fully implement the system. What we're talking about is having procedures and verification checklists at point of use. So when the worker is actually doing the installation, or when the worker's actually taking steps of a procedure, everything is right at their fingertips to utilize. Along with that, there's much more to the system than just a quality manual. There's also internal assessments or internal audits that are done every year in order to make sure that the procedures and the quality manual itself are operating in the way that is expected, and that the outcome is as expected. There's corrective actions and preventative actions that we touched on, where you know, having those ways to prevent and get management involved when something comes up to prevent defects or deficiencies from happening in the first place, and of course making sure that they don't happen again. So there's a lot more to a fully implemented quality management system than just simply a quality manual. With that said, it is an important first step to have a quality manual. So it's a step in the right direction, but may not be fully implemented.
Great. And you touched on a question that I had as we were watching the video, is how often should policies and procedures be reviewed and revised?
At least annually. Everything, all policies, all procedures should be looked at least annually to make sure that they're still up to date, because so many things change, especially now. That what the procedures say and what the verifications are still have relevance to what is being done today. So at least annually.
Great, thank you. Next question is, does what you are talking about here require a lot of company time to set up as a system?
Well, one of the reasons that we created these workshops in the first place was to try to help companies reduce the time that it takes in order to implement these systems. It's one of those things that it's hard for a company to afford not to put things in place that help with quality and help with the outcome. A lot of time is spent on reworks and headaches and chasing things that can be eliminated by quality management systems. So I don't want to downplay the fact that it does take a significant commitment by the company to put this in place. But once it's in place, it can help streamline everything. Like we always talk about eating an elephant. We say, if you're gonna ever have to eat an elephant, you can only do it one bite at a time. Well, this may look like an elephant at first, but a great place to start is to have each department tackle a little piece of it. So in the shop, you ask the shop supervisor and maybe the receiving clerk and maybe the inventory clerk, or sometimes those are shared positions, but have them write down what they do. When material comes in, what do they do? What is done in the shop for fabricating or for calibrating a machine at the beginning of the day, and just taking some of those steps and then starting to pull them together and compiling them into one system is a way to get started. So it doesn't take just one person. It's kind of a team effort that everybody can do. So it's also great to tackle in slower times. I know we're up here in the Northeast and things slow down in the winter. So it's a way for a company to have some time maybe to catch their breath and implement some of these things. And we'd be happy to help with workshops and samples and examples of ideas.
Well, great. And I think the results of this poll here kind of should do your heart some good there, Jeff, to see that people would be interested in implementing.
Yeah, always good to see that there is interest. And we started running these workshops back in March of this year. And we've run close to 50 workshops now with people joining us and learning more. But the nice thing is we're working one-on-one with an organization in the workshops. So it's a way for that organization to ask questions. It's not just sitting in a seminar necessarily. It's a way to do one-on-one discussions.
Great. And before I ask the next question, I'm going to share the results of this poll because it's related here. And again, asking what is already in place and having kind of a root cause analysis type of a culture there. And I think that kind of goes along with the question that aren't foremen and superintendents responsible for quality, and why does this system that you are advocating here help us?
Well, they are responsible for the quality, but that's just for shop and field. There is so much more that goes into getting a job up and running and off the ground and to its successful conclusion. There are a lot of administrative tasks, a lot of PM tasks and estimating tasks even before that. So procedures are necessary to make sure that everybody's following best practices and following what the upper management wants done, and the verification procedures see to that. The field guys, the field superintendents, forms, yes, they are responsible for quality ultimately once it reaches the field. But if they have not been trained on how to manage, and it's just, again, assumed that they know how to check for things, when to check for things, and what to check for, then things are going to be missed. It's just the nature of the beast. It's not to say that they're not doing their job. They are doing their job as they see it, and as management has communicated it. But these quality management system procedures and so forth point them in the direction of what's important to management, what's important to the successful outcome of the project.
And Ben, I think you hit perfectly on the results from this poll in terms of a formal verification process. And it was kind of interesting how many people do not have one in place. And I'll give you an opportunity to, again, explain why that is an important piece.
Well, it's great to have verification processes in place and checklists to make sure that those are tied together in one system. Again, is important. It's good to see that some of that is being done, but really the importance of having verifications is that second set of eyes that we talk about. In quality, it's just like when I write an email. I write an email and there may be a typographical error in it. Maybe I use the word "the" twice, and I can read that email 3 times and skip right over that because I'm the one that wrote it. The reality is having that second set of eyes, it may become glaring very quickly, and having a checklist for that second set of eyes to follow to make sure that they're not only checking, but they're checking the right things in the right order can be very, very valuable to the overall outcome and overall quality.
Great. Here's a good question. Isn't this the same as ISO 9000?
Okay, so ISO 9000 is the principles are similar, and what we find is that ISO 9000 implemented into a controlled environment like a manufacturing facility can be very valuable. And we in no way downplay the importance of ISO 9000, but in one situation, you may be looking at ISO 9000 and say, what do I need to do in order to become ISO accredited or ISO certified? So what we're looking at is with this quality management system, we're trying to follow what's best for the company. It's about what's doing right for the best outcomes on your projects, what's doing what you have to do in order to have smaller punch lists, in order to improve your reputation, And the simplicity of what we're talking about, you could almost look at it like an ISO 9000 light, if you will. Doesn't quite reach all the complexities of that, so it's designed better for a glazing contractor situation where things are happening in the field, things are happening in the shop, things are happening in project management. It's a great way to pull it all together in a system that makes sense for your business.
Great, thank you. And this kind of ties along with that is, but isn't this easier, or isn't this more important for the big contracting firms and not necessarily for the small shops?
No, not really. I've seen all different size shops benefit from a quality management system. And sometimes the smaller shops that are the mom and pop and everybody communicates and there are very few people involved in a project, sometimes more things fall through the cracks than you would imagine, simply because they're not quite as well structured. But whether it's small or large, I have never seen a company that has not benefited from implementing and embracing a quality management system. Not just putting it into place to check a box, because a project might call for it, or an architect might say the installer has to have a quality management system, but actually embracing it and having a top-down approach to the quality management system.
Well, great. And you kind of previewed my next question, which is, are architects asking that companies have these quality management certifications?
Yes, the architects, they intend to have the project turn out as a project that they can be proud of in the end. And glazing is one of the most disruptive pieces if it doesn't go right, the entire building envelope. So architects, we're doing the same types of workshops with architects to let them know about how quality management systems and certifications can help their projects. But we've also been working along with some of the data and analytics companies that monitor the construction industry recently. And we've seen a ramp up in companies that are in architects and design teams that are specifying the NACC program as an example, which calls out requirements for quality management systems. So the installer qualifications, having a quality manual, having a fully implemented quality management system, and of course NACC captures all of that and makes sure that that's in place through a third-party attestation. So we're definitely seeing a ramp up in it. I think it will only get more important, as time goes on. Quality is an important piece of the building envelope, and we'll see even more of that written into specifications in the future.
Well, great. And we're out of time and out of questions, so it kind of worked out perfectly. Any last words, Ben and Jeff, before we wrap it up here?
We're available at any time to talk to anybody who's got any questions about quality management systems and how to implement it and what it can do for their company.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank Ben and Jeff for the discussion of quality management systems and their time today. Please be sure to visit the Glass Build Connect website product pages being sent to you now in the chat. On the education page, please take a moment to let us know how we are doing.